Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Jess Ray. Jess is our workforce retention strategist, and she works with our clients all across the country to reduce unnecessary employee turnover. And she does this by making managers more effective in their role and bridging those generational gaps, which she will talk a lot about. So she's definitely one to listen to. So Jess, welcome, and you are free to get started.
Great. Thank you so much for the intro, Maggie. And thank you all so much for joining us. This is our third webinar in our series. And today we are focusing on our guidance upon entry, or what I like to look at as outstanding onboarding. So we do have a few more in the series that we'll touch on, and you can go to, again, magnetwebinars.com to receive those playbacks and to sign up for the future webinars, as Maggie had said. So before we dive in to our onboarding strategies and tactics, it's important that we kind of lay some foundation as we approach today's session. If you have read Cara Silletto's Staying Power book or seen one of our trainers or speakers live, this message may sound familiar to you. But we talk about putting our workforce into two different buckets. And the first bucket is our trees. And these folks are our deep-rooted individuals. They have weathered the storm. They have seen financial gain and decline. Maybe they've seen acquisitions. And the reason they're probably leaving usually is retirement. Now, our next bucket of workforce is our revolving door. And this looks a little different from industry to industry, organization to organization. Maybe it's a 30, 60, 90-day revolving door that you have. Maybe it's a 1 to 2 year revolving door. But these folks are considered our flight risk. That is your new hires. And that's why today we are focusing on that new hire experience, because these folks are more apt to leave your company as they are not deep-rooted like the first bucket of individuals that we talked about. So again, who's the new flight risk? Every new hire. So let's talk about a better new onboarding experience for those individuals. So talk about your first day. Is it welcoming? Is it at the end of the day their hand is cramped from filling out 150 forms? Is it stimulating at all, or is it sitting in front of e-learning for 8 hours and hearing that kind of monotony, so to speak? We kind of talk about two different day ones. We've got our day one with HR, and we have our day one, so to speak, with our manager, their direct supervisor. What you don't want that day one to look like with the manager would be something like this. Oh, you're here today. That's right. And I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. I tell you what, you shadow John, and I'll be back in a couple hours. That would be a bad example of that manager taking that new hire on. So we want to be very sensitive to that. Is your day one covering, of course, the compliance, but does it cover the culture? And this doesn't mean walking past a flyer or a framed poster with your mission and vision statement. Are they really hearing and feeling the sense and the tone of the culture within your organization? This is our history. This is who we are. This is our purpose. This is why we're here. We want to make sure that that is really ingrained in our messaging to that new hire, not just the compliance part that we have to do. And next, how often are we checking on our new hires? This doesn't really mean oh, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you. I hope you're doing okay. See you. This is more of a one-on-one, pull out a chair, look them in the eyes and say, so how you doing? What do you need? How can I help you? Is there any resources? Do you need this, that, And that can look very different from the first day to the first week to the 4-week mark, 6, etc. So we really recommend that manager will take the time out of their day to check in periodically on that new hire as well, and increase your frequency. That brings us to the next part here, which is, what is each department's training plan for that new hire? So now we've got to schedule those touch bases, and we also have to talk to them and get a plan ready for their training. You cannot shove as much as you can in that first day or even the first week if it would take months to acclimate them. Nor do we have the luxury of getting someone up to speed in 9 months worth of time. We just don't have that luxury anymore. So we need to make sure that management and leadership has a timeline of needs, so that we can get out of that fog. If you can remember your first day at the job that you're in right now, or if you're considered a new hire, think about a position that you were at for some time. I mean, in most situations, you kind of have this fog of information. And do you remember anything that was said that first day or first week? And so having that training sequence in place will allow for that individual to really learn and adapt. What do they need to know and when? So let's talk a little bit about some procedural things that we can tweak as well, some little tricks that we have. The first little trick up our sleeve is to completely forget memorization, or at least as much as we can. We want to take that unnecessary action that slow their progression out so that they can get up to speed faster, right? So putting as much at their fingertips as possible. Maybe that's a packet of acronyms. We have some clients that are using the back of the name badge that that person has to wear and putting little cheat codes on there, or maybe it's names of people that they would need to know. Remember that they won't be acclimated to the jargon sometimes, or the acronyms that you're using all the time that we end up using when we're there, for a year or more. So things change really fast. And so the other part about memorization is something that they memorized 2 months ago could very well change. So let's not waste our time with that type of memorization. The other part is to label everything. Now, most of us would know to label our filing cabinets and our supply closets and even signs to the restroom. But what about your electronic labeling, if that applies to you? If they were to jump into your shared drive right now, would they be able to navigate where to save a specific document? Or would they have to make 5 phone calls to your IT and send 10 emails? So let's take that element out and make sure that we label and make it as many things as obvious as we can. And our third little trick here is to provide some foolproof checklists. I tell you, the fast food folks have it down pat. So a great example would be this. You're going through McDonald's drive-thru and you ordered nuggets. What is the next question that they ask you? What sauce would you like with that, right? And so what happens on their screen is they push the nugget button, and then this little prompt comes up that says, would you like nuggets with that? And so they never skip that step, where 10 years ago they skipped it, and that's when we're shaking our fists as we leave the drive-thru, right? So we want to put those foolproof checklists exactly where they're going to use them. So if they've got a set of procedures they have to do, steps A, B, C, D, etc., we don't want to put those in the back of the handbook, right? We want to laminate and put it on the wall exactly at that workstation or by that terminal so that they are readily available for individuals. All right, so let's talk about handbook a little bit here. So we have our legal team we've met with. That's pretty given. They give us the black and the white, so to speak. But how can we use the handbook to bridge the gap between the orientation and what it is that they need to know, right? So some of our folks are moving to more of a picturesque type of handbook. And so that is more of using imagery to get across your message, to express your expectations, as we talked about in the last webinar. And so not just putting the mundane things that they have to know, but also putting things like the history of the company, or what about a letter from the CEO saying how happy and excited they are to welcome them to the company. Is the handbook about the employee or about the employer? Again, think of this from your new hire's perspective. When you get onto the job day one, you want to know some things about your schedule or your benefits, holiday, different types of pay structures that you may have. That's of interest, right? So let's not let those things go to the last couple pages, and let's bypass the anticipation for those elements and put them towards the front of the handbook, right? We have some clients who are also moving towards the pictures, as mentioned, for attire policies, because let's face it, folks, pants doesn't always mean the same thing to every person, right? So if leggings are not pants in your workplace, it might be a good idea to mention and to also show an example, a photo of a correct way to dress and a not so correct way to address, so that you can bypass, again, those smaller things. All right, the next little trick up our sleeve is that making some get to know you cheat sheets and sharing those with a direct supervisor, or maybe it's the manager that's making those and helping create those. We know you can't ask these types of questions in an interview, obviously, but we can, during orientation, have a fun little colorful sheet for them to fill out. For example, tell me about your family. Tell me about your hobbies. What do you do on your free time? Where do you go? What's your favorite place to visit? What about your kids? What are their names, ages, maybe things that they're involved with as well? Where do you shop? Let's see, how do you like to be rewarded? That could be important too. If you've got an individual who doesn't like to be in front of a big crowd to say, you did a great job, everyone give you a round of applause, maybe asking them, how do you like to be rewarded, publicly or privately? Is it cash in hand or a gift card? So those fun little things that we can talk about, and then pass those off to managers, so that when that new hire comes to you, they've gotten to know them a little bit more. Because remember, about 50 years ago, bosses would know the names of spouses and kids with no hesitation. And those are some of those old school ideas that we need to bring back into the workplace for sure. So the next part of this is, and I stress this because I am, so excited when I get onto and when I get into a new job. I'm ready, I've got so much energy, and so we want to really amplify that and figure out how we can activate our new hires quicker. You wouldn't tell Superman, Clark Kent, put your glasses back on, right? We wouldn't tell LeBron James to stay on the bench. And so we have to find that balance to not activate too quickly, but the balance between proper training and onboarding. They're ready to go. They're ready to help. They've got so many ideas. They are ready to give. And so find that balance between getting them some active things to do on the floor or whatever their day-to-day job is going to end up being, so that they can experience that and get excited about that as well. So a big challenge here. Our challenge is, what adjustments are needed for the incoming diversity of new hires? Again, thinking about it from their perspective. This is no longer a cookie cutter situation where we can only have a one-size-fits-all model for our onboarding. As a matter of fact, we've got lots of different dynamics to deal with. We have generational dynamics. An onboarding package for a baby boomer is going to look way different, or should look different, than maybe a young millennial. their needs are going to be very different. What about new industries? We've got people a lot these days switching different industries. Maybe they're going from healthcare to hospitality to manufacturing. And so as they jump from industry to industry, that looks different than a person who maybe stays within healthcare, right? The other part of this is they take different management styles differently as well. So being sensitive to their needs and their perspectives. And just in general, remembering that one size does not fit all. We need to walk and talk ourselves through what that new hire, day one, week one, month one experience looks like. Come up with a plan. And of course, as we talked about in the past, it's so hard. We have our 40 plus hours worth of work to carve out that time to make improvements. But if we don't, then that's when it's sitting on the sidelines and complaining about the issue instead of just doing something about it, starting somewhere, using some of the tactics that were mentioned and choosing one of them to do this week or choosing one of them to do the next week. But carving out that time, getting with those managers and leaders, receiving feedback and having an open discussion and making time to keep the talent that we so desperately cannot afford to lose in these times. So that's the last part of this, and just want to stress enough that using their perspective to help enhance and getting feedback from those individuals is really important. We also have some clients that are doing some mentorship type of programs, so they're pairing that new hire with maybe a more seasoned individual who's willing and able and wants to help kind of mature that individual. And so we are really excited to see this come into fruition and can't wait to hear what kind of ideas that you all come up with as well. Remember that we do have a few more of our webinars coming up. We covered the management effectiveness and attraction recruiting, and today guidance upon entry. And these are all in order, kind of on purpose, because as we've worked on our management effectiveness and then we've enhanced our attraction and recruiting, now we've got that new hire at our doorstep, and today that's why we focused on the guidance upon entry. So don't miss the other three. We'll finish out our magnet series. I believe that next one is in another couple weeks, but go to our website that Maggie will give you and sign up for those future ones.
Thank you, Jess.
Sure.
We will answer some questions now. We have a few good ones. And while we're answering these questions, feel free to ask more questions in the Q&A box below or even in the chat box as well. But our first question is, what is a recruiter's role in onboarding?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So if we think about it like this, your recruiter was the first contact with that person, right? And so if on day one, for example, that recruiter would carve out some time to go to that individual's desk or workstation and check in with them, even just seeing a familiar face could really help give them, some perspective. And it also shows that that recruiter really cares about that. As a matter of fact, we have a retention job description. And so a lot of our companies are moving our recruiter to both recruiting, but helping with retention as well, because that's the whole purpose, is to recruit and retain as well. And we can certainly send that out to folks, that job description out to folks as well. But that's what our recommendation is for that recruiter, to make sure that they have a touch point with that new hire. I think it would be very successful.
Yes. And also, could you go back to the magnet slide? Someone's requesting to be able to. Yes, perfect.
There you go.
We have, this is the last question, unless anybody else has a question. This will be the last one. What do you do? This is kind of a scenario question. What do you do if someone is eager to mentor new hires, but tends to scare people away when they lay down the line?
Wow, that is such a good question. And so, we want to use the positives of that individual and separate them from the negative. So what is that person good at, right? They want to help acclimate a new hire, but maybe they're not so good with some other parts. So how can we set up that relationship and not give that person all the responsibility of mentoring, but maybe it's a co-mentorship. Maybe you pull that individual aside and you say, you're so good at welcoming them and walking them around the facility or showing them where the lunch break room is and giving them some responsibilities, because it will also help fulfill that individual, but leaving some things and not keeping that person with them all day, like a full-time mentor, to prevent them from scaring people away.
Yes, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Jess. And
Sure.
I will put the next webinar that you mentioned in the chat bar. So thank you for everyone who attended this one. Like I mentioned, we are recording this, so you will receive a playback as well. And we'll also get what Jess mentioned, the job description for the recruiter. We'll get that as well to you. And I also want to tell you about Cara's book, Staying Power. You can get that on Amazon.com. That is great. Also, if you want bulk discount, please let Jess or I know. I'll put our emails in the chat box as well. And that's great for a book club for your leaders and managers as well. And just as a reminder, WeReduceTurnover.com is where you can get all the retention and generational information that we provide on a regular basis. Feel free to join our list on that website as well. And then one thing I didn't mention before was our LinkedIn page. Cara is very active on LinkedIn, and that would be a great place to even receive weekly retention tips as well. It looks like we have just a quick question here.
Sure.
Onboarding tips when the entire process has to be done virtually. We will squeeze this one in since it came in.
Absolutely. And obviously a huge challenge. And as more people go remote in general, again, I can't stress enough to figure out from the new hire's perspective what that looks like. Some people have home offices and some people just don't. And so making sure that they have the basics that they need in order to accomplish their job and to get through just the orientation part, I think would be a great first step in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I put the link for the next webinar in the chat box, so feel free to go ahead and register for that. We look forward to seeing you on that webinar as well. So thank you and have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.